What I make of it is the strategy of the Republican Party obviously has to shift. It has to move away from trying to empower people through the worst of what we are as human beings and as Americans, which goes back to our original sin of racism, and go back to what type of policies can empower all sorts of people regardless of where you come from.
Lenny, but hold on a second, because your party is literally what your party, I mean, you as a man of color yourself, do you feel comfortable in a party that does rallies like that?
Look, I walked away from something like this pretty recently, where I was supposed to speak, and I walked away because of how I felt based on the rhetoric, and I was supposed to speak at the rally. My point is this, though, Joy, the greater point. They're using racism as an avenue through which to make people feel empowered. When people feel empowered, they lend you their support and their loyalty. They lend you the loyalty, they give you the vote. What Republicans need to do is try to continue to empower people, but not by using racism, not by using xenophobia, not by using sexism and little wink-wink nods that go back to the old boys networks of the 1800s and 1900s. What we don't do well is talk about our policies and empower people that way. That's a harder sell, especially after the 1930s through the 1960s with African Americans and what we're seeing with Latinos today. But is there a way to turn this around? Yes, but it starts with denouncing this type of behavior continuously, being very good at talking about policies that empower people so that we could talk about empowering the poor without having to go to basal sins that we have long since not been able to get over.
I'm going to let everybody else in, but I want to stay with you for just one moment, Leonard, because isn't the challenge here that Donald Trump understood that most of the policies that Republicans were pushing, the small government ideas, et cetera, pollute their water if they live on a farm, the ideas of doing trade, embargoes against other countries, kills their own economic condition, that the tax cuts help the rich, don't help them. I mean, Donald Trump kind of understood that he can get more base than that because the actual policies that the elite Republicans wanted help rich people. But Donald Trump is saying to the poorer white Americans, I'm going to give you maximum whiteness. I'm going to let you decide who's an American. I'm going to let you decide what language people should speak. I'm giving you power. I'm giving you what W.E.B. Du Bois called the wages of whiteness, because he can't give them anything else because the policies help the rich. Isn't that the problem?
I'm sorry, are you coming to Leonard or Lenny?
No, I'm coming to Lenny.
Okay.
You're coming, well, and yes, there's something to be said about that, but you also have to look at other policies as well, such as school choice, such as trying to get some of the deregulations out of.
I mean, look, they help. I mean,
well, hold on.
But
it helps African, but Joy, but it also helps disproportionately African Americans that are stuck in urban environments, such as Philadelphia. No. See that? No, hold on, Joy. Hold on. You asked me a question. Let me answer that. If you look at where these kids are going to, it's not going to corporations and black kids not being able to go to better schools and thus be able to go to college and be part of the American dream. That is a policy that disproportionately helps African Americans.
We're not going to have a whole discussion on schools. Let's stay with this
interesting. The Republican Party actually was pretty fabulous on immigration. It wasn't just Ronald Reagan, and you know, this is interesting to say about
who did an outright amnesty, by the way.
And people didn't like to call it an amnesty, right? They didn't like to call it an amnesty because they were like, we didn't cross the border crossed us. Okay, fine. But okay, Ronald Reagan does that. It's kind of extraordinary. George H.W. Bush, who gets elected, does more for immigration. You know who comes in and basically says, oh, no, we need to kind of check this stuff out. We need to stop this. It's Bill Clinton. It's the Democrats. So the Republicans actually owned the issue of immigration. They were the progressive, forward-thinking, if you will, I mean, within parentheses, okay? They were forward-thinking. They have, and frankly, the Democrats now don't know what to do with it, but the Republicans squandered the one issue that they could have taken and run with because of white supremacy and racism.
And by the way, most Americans used to be Republican, right?
Well, I wouldn't say most, but there were enough to say that yes, they had significant support. But of course, you know, now things have totally changed, where a majority of Muslims are obviously not with Republicans. And I was going to say, to counter what the gentleman was saying over there on the Republican side, that there are actual bigoted policies that are backing up the bigoted rhetoric now. So you're seeing changes to, you know, asylum laws, changes to even legal immigration. That's why you have a huge backlog, the lowest number of refugees allowed into the country. And then now there's reporting that they want to change that number to 0.
Yes.
And then the zero tolerance policy, all kinds of things going on that are actually backing. So it's not just rhetoric. It's not just campaign. It's actual policies. And we can't lose sight of that.
Can I Leonard in
May
here?
I
Because
respond to that?
hold on. I'm going to let you back in, but I want to let Leonard in too,
Okay.
because I think that point is really important, Leonard. That Trump is not just saying racist things. The things that he's doing, that Stephen Miller is engineering inside that White House, are shocking to the conscience. The idea that they don't want any immigration from non-white countries, that they want no people to be able to seek asylum. They're actually literally trying to kind of cleanse the country of any new incoming brown people and push out as many as they can. It is the policies that I think are even more frightening.
Well, that's because, contrary to what we heard a moment ago, this appeal is not to empowering white Americans. I don't know when white Americans ever became disempowered. So that's an interesting, phraseology. But this is not about empowering. This is not about empowering. This is not about empowering white Americans. This is about appealing to white American fears that they are, as the woman memorably shouted during Barack Obama's first term, losing their country. I want my country. And when they say I want my country back, what they mean is I want a country where people like me had all the positions of power, made all of the decisions, were the ones that were in charge, were the ones that were in control. I don't like the fact that these Muslims, that these gays, that these African Americans, that these people with brown skin are suddenly more prominent, are suddenly being seen more, are suddenly doing more in the public eye. I want my country back. So this is not an appeal to empowerment. This is an appeal to fear. This is an appeal to the sense of loss of demographic primacy. I always put it like this: if you've been the lead singer, if you've been Gladys Knight for 400 years, it's really difficult to countenance going back to being just a pip.
Yeah.
And I think for white people in America, that's the great fear, that we will henceforth all just be pips.
Yeah. And the thing is, to come back to you for a minute, Lenny, and I will let Adam back in. To the point that when President Obama was trying to save the country from the greatest recession since the Great Depression, they all said, no, he's president. He's not legitimate to be president. They wouldn't do anything that he wanted. Donald Trump reversed the Iran nuclear deal. Now